And the interesting thing is that you can do both at the same time. And if you do both at the same time, for instance, you first give the odd harmonics and then you start to wiggle with this one, you get a very nice kind of PWM modulation sound. So, why I found this oscillator interesting to actually use in a synthesizer is because you get the classic sounds. But you get one more parameter, and that parameter is basically brightness. Because what you do is you sort of so if let me just modulate the wave shaping, because it's also voltage controlled, of course. You can sort of make effects like this. Then you overdrive the input of the thing. I think this is the maximum we can get. That should be a little bit louder.
You see that? Just in the back?
Yeah, but according to Sandy tried it, you need a screwdriver.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I would like this. You can do this nice lower frequencies, you know, good mood sounds, but also and it still works, and it's totally aliasing free. And of course the idea that you can modulate this, I like very much. So for instance I can sort of, let me see, a little bit of envelope here. Okay. Well, if you have a little bit more volume, then it really starts to roll. There's another quite thing that I discovered, interesting thing that I discovered about this oscillator, and I find it very interesting to work with it, is that I'm now going to compare it with a traditional Dupfer sawtooth wave, and sort of listen to what is the difference between the one and the other, and see if that gives you some interesting information. Okay. I would really like to have more volume. Thank you very much, Chris. You saved my life. Okay. So now this cable. So this is what I have called this the harmonic oscillator, because you have to figure out a name for things like that. And I thought, well, okay, you know, it creates harmonic series. Let's call it a harmonic oscillator. What the hell, you know? figuring out names is, you have to do it. It's, and come up with something that people remember, like, oh, harmonic oscillator, okay. Yeah. I could also call it a generative oscillator or something, you know, but that, I cannot even pronounce it myself. Okay. Let me see. So here. That's you hear that there is a sort of a difference in the sound. This one sounds very static. It doesn't have a lot of depth. But then if I fade to the other one, it sounds different. You hear a clear, distinct, different kind of sound. But it also depends a little bit, but it sounds like it has a little bit more depth. And I don't know why exactly that is, but I think that is because actually if you would look at the waveform on an oscilloscope, it doesn't really, it approaches a sawtooth wave, but it more looks like it goes up quite straight and then sort of has a little bend at the top and a sharp corner at the bottom. And that's because it is a recursive action, so there is always a slight time delay, so there are a little bit of phase shifts between the harmonics. Not all the harmonics exactly start at 0 degree, scientifically said. So, but the big difference is that, you know, with this oscillator, I only have this sound. So I really need to use like a filter or anything to do something with it. But with this oscillator, I can do all this nice sort of effects. And especially now you hear that the new parameter that this oscillator basically has is amount of brightness. And if you are doing a mix, then it's very important to be able to sort of set the amount of brightness. Because if you work with a recording and there's vocals in the recording, especially female vocals but also male vocals. Now vocals have all this fluffy stuff in the high, and that is very important. And if you only have a very little bit of too much high from the sawtooth over the vocals, then you kill the vocals. So you basically don't really want your synthesizers to sort of give signals up to like 15 kilohertz. You would actually sort of like to cut them off at like maybe 3 or 4 kilohertz, because everything that's above 3 or 4 kilohertz, that is vocals, that is percussion, the cymbals, stuff, you know, you don't really want to have your synthesizer do stuff there, because actually it will kill your sense of spaciousness. With a new filter, and I would like to talk a little bit about this new filter. It's not a new idea, because it's called the twin peak filter, and it's a special kind of bandpass filter. But it is a type of filter that I have been using already in much more stuff, because I like it myself very much. For instance, in this Blippo box that is still around, you see twin peak resonator, and there is a, I think this is the 6th or 7th actual twin peak, but I think that this is the best design up to now, the most extreme one. Basically, it is also based on the fact that, like how you can do mathematics with waves, you can add them, which is called mixing, you can multiply them, which is called voltage controlled amplification, you can do more stuff with them, like integration and differentiation, and combine that with adding and subtracting, and then you end up with filters. You can actually also do mathematics with filter bands. Because imagine if you want to make a bandpass filter, then a bandpass filter is mostly made up of a low-pass filter and a high-pass filter, where the high-pass filter is tuned lower as the low-pass filter, so that basically you get a band in between that is passed. But that, if you want to make that voltage controlled, you have one big disadvantage, and that is that when your high-pass filter gets tuned higher as your low-pass, nothing comes through anymore, and you have silence. And actually, that is half of your knob range. So it's interesting to think of a bandpass filter where you basically set sort of one point and another point, and you always hear what is in between those points, no matter how you tune the points and which one is tuned higher. And to do that, you actually don't use a high-pass and a low-pass filter in series, but you use two low-pass filters in parallel. And what you do is you tune them differently, but you subtract the output of one of the filters from the output of the other one. And if the gain of both filters is equal, then that must work. So let's see if that works. I will create a bright sound so we can filter it well. And I will put it in here and keep it a little bit volume. There it is. I made a filter in a way that you actually, this particular kind of twin peak filter, that you basically get the max out of all the possibilities. And so we actually have two inputs, and for each input we can set whether it's a low pass or a band pass. So if I only use input 1 and I set input 1 to low pass, then you have a pretty traditional low pass filter. I can increase the resonance to a almost oscillating level, but just not oscillating. But then, and actually what happens now is that the output of both filters is subtracted from each other, and that's what you hear, but only one of the filters gets input. Now if I open this knob, I also start to put input in the other filter, and then suddenly becomes 0. And of course, that's silence. And then it crosses, and hey, So now I have a filter that I can just freely and wildly modulate whatever I want, and it's a bandpass filter, and you get two resonant peaks that give really nice sort of vocal sound, but you never get into this half that is silence that you would get with a high pass and a low pass in series. So, and the only thing that you have to do with this kind of filter that the only thing that influences the gain is the resonance. So if you can control the resonance of both filters at the same time, so they always have the same gain, that is basically the only trick. It's not that easy to do, but you have to solve that. If you have solved that, then basically so then you get interesting modulation possibilities, because you can, for instance, modulate both filters at the same time. So, like I can give it an envelope. But you can also modulate both filters separately, which you can do here. And then change the characteristics a little bit, so you have a little bit less of one band and a little bit more, so that sort of gets you a little bit of bass back. So, okay. You can hear that it's a quite extreme sort of filtering action that you get from this filter. Another thing that you can do is, because I design all modules in a way that it doesn't really matter if it is low frequency or high frequency modulation signals, let's take another oscillator and use another oscillator as a modulation source. I take a nice sine wave, I can almost sound like digital, because good thing about it is that I also made this filter in a way that it will not self-oscillate, but it will be very, very close to that point. That means that if you just give it a pulse, it will ping. It's called the ping characteristic. And if you ping the filter, basically you do that with a very fast envelope. Let's say that we use this one. But it's nice because you have two resonances, so it's like a little bit like the two modes of a percussive sound. If you they're almost the same frequency, you get this nice sort of vibrato effect, which actually what I love, you know, when you have gamelans, Indonesian orchestras, you have these two gongs which are in a square box, and they're tuned almost the same, and they give a very low bass sound. And what they do is they first hit one, and then a little bit later they hit the other. So they hit with a sort of a steady tone, and then when they hit the second one, it suddenly goes woo, 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 woo. And you're into gamelan? And you probably know what I mean. Yeah, yeah. So it's a little bit, so you can do it a little bit with this as well. You can tame it down a little bit if it is too long. And of course, that's the nice thing, we can still, again, sort of audio modulate the sound. Yeah, we can also have like a 5-minute cigarette break and continue after 5 minutes. Because I do very much like to have a cigarette break. So we do a 5-minute cigarette break. Yes, you can. If you build a synthesizer for people that are going to pay a lot of money because it's expensive. Well, it's not expensive, it's a lot of money. There's a difference between that. Because I think it's worthwhile the money, but still, it's a lot of money. You have to cover up like a box like this is like 4,700 euros, which is like over 4,000 pounds, something like that. So then you do have a certain responsibility to the person that you sell it to, that buys it from you. So I think, first of all, I may be a little bit old-fashioned in this, but I think that basically it is a musical instrument. And a musical instrument you can compare with other musical instruments. So, you know, if you're a saxophone player and you want to play with a good saxophone, you probably pay like 4,000 pounds for a good saxophone, but you play it for the rest of your life. So I think that a synthesizer should actually also last a lifetime. Also, I always say, when it takes you 20 years to properly learn how to play a violin, to be able to stand in front of an orchestra and play all the good stuff, why should that be different for a synthesizer? And in electronic music, especially in digital synthesizers and the Eurorack world, it's very much an atmosphere of instant gratification. Like, you want the sound, you buy a module, you put it in the system, turn it on, you have the sound, and instantly you're happy. Actually, when I was working Clavia, we always had this joke that the ideal synthesizer, what does it look like, this design? It's a black box, sort of a flat box that you can put on the table. In the middle, there is one big button. The color is pink, it's a little bit soft. It says on the button, it says hit, and if you hit it, you're instantly famous, filthy rich, and all the girls want to fresh you. That's the ultimate synthesizer in the perception of many. So, of course, it's not like that, and that is alas. But still, if you build a system, you have to build it in a way to try, at least. I think that I, at least every day, have to do the best job that I am able to do. Everything can be better. You know, that is just something, there is no thing like the ultimate perfection or something, you know, but if you try to do really the best job that you have in you, then, well, okay, I think that is okay. And then mostly, it turns out that humans can do very good jobs. So, I hope I'm able to. But also, it's about competence. Because you want everything to last 50 years. Now, yesterday we had this really beautiful putney in the middle of the stage that was probably like 50 years old now. Maybe 40, 50, somewhere in between. And it still works, and it's still played. But maybe if you start to play it, you might notice that one of the first things that go on synthesizers are the knobs. Especially if you have old synthesizers and they haven't been used for a long time and people turn them on for the first time and try the knobs. Sometimes the knobs are really sort of like, you cannot even move them anymore. They're sort of fixed to their position. And you have to use a lot of force for the first time to move it. And then you notice that whenever you pass the point where it was, you had a gap and it crackled. And that, of course, is deathly if you're performing on stage. So basically there's two types of potentiometers. We have ones that use carbon for the sort of travel, and this carbon has the bad habit that if the taper of the pot is on the carbon on one particular spot for maybe like 2 or 3 years, dust and grease and stuff gets into the pot, and the taper sort of glues to the carbon. But this carbon is not very strong, so the first time you move it, you actually pull away the carbon from that point, and you have a problem forever because the carbon will never get back there. So carbon pots are not a very good choice if you want to build something that you want to last. But luckily there's an alternative, and that is basically, it's called conductive plastic. And conductive plastic is much thicker layer, and it's really, you cannot sort of break it down. Even if it is sort of, the taper is glued to the plastic, if you move it, you cannot pull away all the plastic there. Actually, you don't, it works. If you look at the estimated lifespan for carbon pots, that's between 5,000 and 15,000 turns, full turns. That's still a lot of tweaking, but it's not really that much. With conductive plastics, it's 500,000. That's significantly more. Actually, if you get the cheap pots from China these days, which now you must have noticed today that I'm quite enthusiastic about these little bits, but there's also one downside. They use the worst pots that you can get, and their lifespan, estimated lifespan, is only 1,500 tweaks. So I have to soon very subtly talk them into sort of also maybe start to use a better quality pot, even if that means to raise the price by $2 or $3, it's worth it. But good pots are important. The nice thing about these conductive plastic pots is also that they are really light to the touch. That means that you can sort of tweak them really nicely. A lot at the same time, and you can very easily close them like that. Still, they are also very precise, because you don't have to exert a lot of force. When you stop turning, it stays exactly in the place where you stopped. If you use force, mostly you have a little bit of overshoot, and then sometimes with some pots it's really hard to tune an oscillator exactly to another oscillator. This is much easier. So actually I think those are sort of signs of quality, and basically, you know, if you make this stuff, and like me, it's not mass production, everything is handmade. I etch the PCBs myself, I make these front panels myself, everything I do myself, and I make them one by one. Everyone is also slightly different than a previous one. That's also nice, so it's not like they're all the same. Each one is its own little personality. And but I think it's my responsibility to tell the customer, okay, maybe you pay £1,000 more, but that means that you will also be able to use it in hopefully 50 years' time, without any problem, without any crackles, without any, still the same feel, as is normal with a good musical instrument. And regrettably, I see that many of my colleagues in synthesizer land, they rather go for cheapness, but volume instead of, but I do mass production, and I have dealers, intermediate guys that want to also earn money, etc., etc. So I try to stay away from that. But that also means that You know, it takes me like 3 weeks to build a case like this. Maybe I build 10 a year. They're going to be rare. They're always going to be rare. Even if I continue building 10 a year for 20 more years, there will be 200. You know, so that's... We're about to be finished.
Well, we've got 10 minutes, so
Okay.
if you want to leave a bit of space for questions.
That's a good idea. Questions? Shoot. The best question that you can ask is, may I come forward and plug in this cable and see what happens? You first.
What's a run?
A wrangler. Okay, the wrangler is basically a little device that gets two inputs, two frequency inputs, and two waveforms basically, and by some sort of interference operation creates an output signal. And it is based on a little device which is called a shift register. And a shift register is a little digital chip that basically has it's called a data input, and it has a clock input. And what happens is that if you give it a clock pulse, it looks at the data input. If the data input is 1, it sort of shifts a 1 into a row of sort of like buckets. And so it basically shifts the input into the first output position. But then it pushes the first output position to the second output position, the second to the third, third to the fourth to the fifth, etc. On the next clock pulse, maybe the data is a 0. Then the 0 is sort of pushed in and everything is pushed forward one step. And at a certain moment, it falls out, but that is later. So it is a little bit like a 1-bit digital delay. Basically, what you do is, the good thing about this thing is that it basically accepts any waveform, because you just decide if the value is positive, then it's a 1, if it's negative, it's a 0. If the clock goes from negative to positive, that's a clock pulse, it goes in. So you can basically feed it any type of waveform. And then what you do, you take a couple of these output bits and you interpret them as a digital number. Maybe you take like 3 output bits. Then the combination can actually create a voltage level that can be one of 8 possible levels. And then you can use that voltage as sort of like a step signal. Now that is the basic sort of principle. Then it turns out that if you actually feed the output back to the data input through a so-called XOR function or another sort of function, you can create all sorts of different kind of interesting effects. There is a device that is sort of very commonly used, it's called a random number generator. That's basically the same principle, but the idea is that if you you should check out the music of the Dutch composer Jan Boerman. He made music, electronic music, starting in the late 50s. At the moment he's still alive, but I think he's now 91 or 92.
Jan Boerman's still alive.
No, Jan Boerman is... No, you really?
Yeah, the Rijmakers is that.
Huh?
Rijmakers is the last year.
But Boerman is still, but he... And actually, the last time I saw him perform, he was actually he was 86 and he was playing one of his tapes somewhere, and it was really like he's so fragile and old now, and his music can be really loud. He was behind the mixing desk. Oh, fantastic! But he had this really interesting idea, because he said, well, you know, at the one hand you can have like a sine wave. Sine wave is like distilled water. It is the most purest thing that you can find in a sound, a sine wave. At the other side you have noise. Now, noise basically contains all frequencies at certain levels that change all the time. So let's say a lot now. So he said, let's make a range between a sine wave and noise, and go in between. And that basically was his main principle of composing. And he made some really interesting stuff. And it's all re-released in 5.1 these days. Regrettably, we don't have Kees Staselaar today here, because he was hopefully coming here.
Yeah,
and he's
hopefully
the guy
next
who
year we can really make a presentation of Jan Borman's music.
And he digitized all the old tapes and converted it, and he is the expert in this field, but Jan Boerman really interested. So this Rungler is sort of very much inspired by the idea of Jan Boerman to be able to explore a territory that is somewhere between order and chaos. Total order and total chaos. So that's sort of the idea behind it.
That was
One more question?
do you make it from start to finish, like in a linear process? I'm going to build this one at a time, or do you get like a rush of orders, like all 10 at once each year?
There's a waiting list that is processed in order.
Okay, and then so you will just work on one until it's finished,
Yeah.
and then the next one.
Yeah.
All right.
Because it's if you, I was talking to some, I had to Tom, I think now like if you stuff one PCB, that is quite meditative work. Stuff the components in one PCB, and then you do a front panel, and then you stuff another PCB, and etc. That is sort of a very relaxed way of working. If you stuff 5 of the same PCBs at the same time, it starts to get boring. you think about, you start to think like, shouldn't the Chinese be doing this kind of work? It's sort of like, then, no, I don't really want to go there. My idea is that basically I'm the same kind of person as the guitar builder at the corner of the street, You go to the guy and he asks you what the body blue or green or flamed or what kind of wood you want for the, so I...
Did you mention your background?
Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like, like actually jewelry making is the same if you make a one special, very expensive piece with lots of diamonds, that's really great work. But if you have to do 50 of the same cheap silver change in one morning, you really think like, this should be done in China. So, yeah, that's the way it is. So basically, I order a case. I don't make these 5 cases myself because it's sort of a lightweight, high-tech material that needs special tools to be made, and I don't have the tools. And so I just ordered them for €325, and I charged the client €325 because I want to have nothing to do with that. Then I build a frame, which is relatively simple. Put a power supply in the frame, universal power supply that goes from 85 to 265 volts, and it's very rugged, works everywhere. The power supply is able to provide more than 1 ampere on both the plus 15 and the minus 15 lines, and it's green and efficient and lightweight, and so there's no reason to go for old transformer power supplies in the analog world. Some people think that it should be like that, but that's totally bullshit. You want to have green, efficient, lightweight, good working. There's all sorts of tests in there. If it's short-circuited, it stops. If it's overloaded, it automatically stops. It doesn't even have fuses anymore because it has so many sensors inside to check if it's working properly that you don't need fuses anymore. Then after I have the frame, I start to build the panels one by one. Mostly I etch all the PCBs that I need in one go, because that's just more sufficient with the chemicals, but that's like 1 day of work. And so that's a nice thing. And so all in all, it's 3 weeks of work, and then it's ready.
It's really the opposite of mass production or standardization.
Yeah, and I also think that maybe if I'm allowed to say something for one more minute, you know, I feel it like this, that you know, we're in a moment where you hear people that maybe in Western society we should slowly go back to a maker society instead of the shortlist economy where everybody is a clerk, you know, and that we need good plumbers and people like carpenters back instead of having all the cheap IKEA bullshit that falls down breaks down after a day. And so I think that, yeah, I like that idea, so I try to test if it's possible by actually doing it myself. I call it a no-budget company model, meaning that the only thing you should not do is go to a bank for funding. Just don't go to a bank for funding. Go to your auntie, do some, you know, crowdfunding, you know, or something like that, you know, but avoid banks. That's the only rule. And then just with a minimum amount of investment, basically you invest in tools. That's important because there's one rule, that is that a product, a thing that you make with a tool, the quality of that thing can never be higher than the quality of the tool you use. So you need good tools, so you need to invest in good tools. But that's not really that much money. A couple of £1,000, okay, but then you have the good tools that you can do the work, and the tools will last 20 years. So it's not a big thing. And then basically, when somebody orders, you can do two things, like, well, okay, maybe you pay half of the money, and I use that money to buy the stuff, the components and materials, and build it, and it's ready, you pay the second half. But I find it more friendly not to do that, to sort of do that from my own capital, and only when the thing is finished, then it's what we Dutch call boter bij de vis, butter with the fish. You know, we exchange the money and the goods at the same time, and then everybody's happy. So people, I don't accept prepayments because it only clutters the administration, and luckily I don't really need it. But still, I think that I have maybe 5,000–6,000 euro invested as a working capital. But I sort of
5,000–6,000 euros.
Yeah.
That's nothing.
No.
That's amazing.
And each year I triple, quadruple that amount by the work that I do. So, you know, it's like I get 200–300% interest on that 5,000–6,000 euro a year. Now, you know, go to that, find a bank that will give you that kind of thing. And if I wouldn't do the work, you know, do the job, I would just sit idly in my home. You know, and the Netherlands is a nice country because they would immediately pay me social security payment because they wouldn't want me to go out stealing bread from the bakery store, etc. You know, but so I would. In the Netherlands, you don't read if you don't want to. You don't have to do anything. You know, they keep you alive. You know, they will not make you rich, but they will keep you alive in a way that you're just satisfied enough that you don't go out stealing. You know, but that's not my way. I like to do things. I like to think about these wave maths and what you can do with it, and etc., and then do experiments if it works and if my theories are indeed correct or not. And many times these days they are. Used to be different years ago, and still sometimes, you know, I come up with the impossible, because the idée fixe is also there, you know. But it's also, you know, if you do like this in one part of this no budget kind of business model, is also that the problems do not exist in this model. That's a really good thing. There's no problems. Problems don't exist. We have either solutions or either fixes. So if you find a solution, well, we solved it. So no problem. And if it's a needed fix, you will find out that it's a needed fix. Okay, it's not possible. Okay, it's not a problem. It's a needed fix. So you start to do something that does work. I think I should conclude.
Yeah.
It's an art. It's not a science, it's an art.
I've got to immediately announce that the Tintin Petronian Kyrgyzstan Orchestra are about to start downstairs right now.
What they were saying, digital simulation.
I know they use it at the conservatory in Düsseldorf.